Hi guys and welcome back to another video. I'm Shah and this is Thoroughly Enjoyed Books. Today I am bringing you my problematic faves. I wanted to make a video where I acknowledge some of the books that I've read and really loved, but also have some really problematic things in them, whether that be a plot twist or a depiction of a character or group of characters or type of people. Also where things that are just wrong are mentioned and then brushed under the carpet as if there's nothing wrong with them. I want to preface this video by saying I firmly believe that you have the right to enjoy what you want. Things can be problematic and that doesn't mean you're not allowed to like them, and that doesn't necessarily mean that the book is bad. But what I think should be done is if you read something problematic, you shouldn't excuse that. You shouldn't push that aside just because you enjoy it. If you acknowledge that and work through that, then that is better than just accepting it as a fact. So that was the idea behind this video. So this video was inspired by two things. First of all, the Anna and the French Kiss special edition is coming out soon and it's beautiful, and it just had me thinking, gosh, that book is beautiful and I love that book, but I'm so uncomfortable with it now. And number two is that I was watching Books and Lala's video where she talked about how she read a Kathryn and McManus book and just felt really uncomfortable with one of the representations within it. And I thought, girl, same. I've already given you a little bit of a hint about two books that are going to be talked about in this video, and I've got 5 that I want to talk about. I can't talk about some of these things without giving away spoilers, so if I do mention spoilers, I will leave a spoiler tag at the bottom of the screen, and I will also leave timestamps down below if you want to skip a certain book because you're interested in it. But just know that other than one book, the spoilers aren't necessarily going to ruin your experience of the book. They are just going to give you a bit of context as to why it might be a bit problematic. Without further ado, let's get right into this video. The first book I want to talk about is, of course, Anna and the French Kiss. I don't have my copy with me. It's back at my dad's house because I read this 7 years ago now, or even 8 years ago. It was a really long time ago anyway. And I really enjoyed this book when I read it. At the time, it was a cute little romance, YA romance, set in a boarding school in Paris, and I just thought it was really sweet. However, I never had all these mushy feelings for the main love interest that a lot of people have, and that is because I found it really problematic. Basically, our main character Anna is an American who has gone to a boarding school in Paris where she meets Etienne St. Clair. Etienne St. Clair is in a relationship with another girl. It's quite clear that him and Anna are falling for each other. They try and make it just a platonic relationship. However, it's quite clear that ain't the case. They're very attracted to each other. They are destined to have a relationship. And they kind of grow, and there's kind of some unintentional cheating in the beginning. It's accidental. They just can't resist one another, blah, blah, blah. However, it does become acknowledged in this book that Etienne St. Clair does not know what to do with his current girlfriend, and instead of breaking up with her, he continues his relationship with Anna and blames the girlfriend for the cheating because he can't break up with her for some reason, so it's all her fault, and that is so problematic. I am somebody that does not mind cheating in books. Yes, it makes me uncomfortable, but it isn't a deal breaker in books for me, and I don't think anybody should ever be excused for it. It happens, and I think if we just never had cheating in books, then it wouldn't be very realistic. What the problem with the cheating in this book is the blaming on the girlfriend, and the fact that once the relationship does end and he goes off with Anna, it's never mentioned again, and he is depicted as this perfect guy, this love interest that has never done anything wrong in his life. He's the most kind, caring and loving boyfriend ever, but he's demonstrated that he can cheat, and now there's no problem with that. Do you see where I'm going? This is so problematic to me. It really winds me up that this just never really gets mentioned when people talk about this book, because it's kind of the core thing of this book, is how is he going to break up with his girlfriend? This new edition that you've probably seen all over the internet is absolutely stunning and I want it, but I'm trying to reconcile the problematic things of this book with justifying buying it. Moving on, the second book I have to talk about is One of Us is Lying by Kathryn and McManus. Now, I've read all of this author's books, and I love all of these authors' books, and I will continue to read and buy all of these authors' books. My problem with One of Us is Lying, and this is going to be a huge spoiler, is the ending. So I can't talk about this without spoiling the book. So if you haven't read this book and want to, then maybe skip over this. But I will very briefly say that it is a depiction of mental health, and the depiction of mental health being attention-seeking and dramatic. If you do not want that depiction of mental health in your book, do not read it. However, for those of you who have read this book or are not interested in this book at all, I will go into a little bit more detail. Click away now if you don't want to be spoiled. I'll take spoiler off when you can unmute or come back. This entire story follows Simon, and he is murdered in his detention. However, in the end, it turns out it wasn't murder, it was suicide. And that just rubs me up completely the wrong way. I thought it was a fantastic twist. I saw it coming. I did kind of guess it. And I thought, yes, shocking, thrilling, all that kind of stuff. However, what it doesn't take into account is a lot of people's opinion of mental health in general. A lot of people think that people with mental health problems are attention seeking. Particularly from my point of view, I suffer with bipolar disorder, and particularly when I'm manic or in my mixed states, I get really emotional. And I've had people tell me that I am being attention seeking and being dramatic, and all I want is people to look at me. So the fact that this book kind of went down that path was disgusting to me. Again, I loved the book and I very much notice these problematic things, and I still think it's a fantastic book. And it's one of those things that I just sit there and go, I don't know how to feel. And I will sit there and admit every time that I love this book, and I will continue to read her books. And I feel like there'll probably be more problematic stuff in the future of her books, because there is a few problems with her other books as well. However, I'm able to acknowledge those, and I know that I won't be using those interpretations in my own life. I won't look at somebody with a mental health problem or somebody who is suicidal. I hate the idea that suicide is going to be seen as dramatic and attention-seeking from now on, because that is not the case. Somebody feels so low that they have to take their own life. That isn't attention-seeking, because what attention-seeking does somebody get once they're dead? That is a cry for help. People need help, and people need more support when they are going through this. So I think that there is a lot of dangerous things that this book does. You can come back now, we're done with the spoilers. I think one of the main reasons I love the book is there are two characters in this book, Bronwyn and Nate, whose relationship I adore. I absolutely adore their relationship and that dynamic. And I think more than anything, that's what held me onto this book. The depiction of mental health in this book is not good. It's kind of damaging, but I think you can still enjoy this book whilst acknowledging those problematic things. Let's just stick with the mental health depiction for a minute, because I think this book is very problematic, and it's Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. Now, I think this one is intentionally problematic. I was a bit iffy about putting this in here or not, because I have a few books that I want to talk about that people claim to be problematic, but aren't, because that's kind of the purpose of the book. And I think there's a lot of times where conflicts are misinterpreted as problematic. The Virgin Suicides, as you can see, it follows virgin suicide. This follows a family. They have 5 daughters, I want to say, and one by one, each one dies by suicide in a different way. And it's told from the perspective of a group of boys who were obsessed with the girls when they were younger. I think they were a couple of years older at the time of the suicides as the girls were, and they are watching through this lens. Now, it is a very male gaze, and I think that is an intentional part of this book, and it's a very unreliable narrator. Again, part of this book. We are meant to feel uncomfortable with the boys' obsessions over these girls, and we're meant to only know half of the story. However, my issue with this book comes from the fact that all 5 of the girls die by suicide. We are never really given any more perspective as to why. Again, it's the entire point of this book is that these boys who are telling the story don't know anything about what is going on inside the house. They don't know the reasons for the girls dying by suicide and choosing to take their own lives. Nothing of the family is obviously mentioned. We've got no perspective. The women have no voice in this story. And I think that's what makes it problematic, even though it is the intention of the book. For a start, the girls are all virgins, except I think one isn't. It's not a big deal, but in this book, it's a big deal. The construct of virginity is bullshit anyway, but in this book, it's kind of fundamental, and it makes me uncomfortable that all of these girls, who I believe are aged between 13 and kind of 16, 17, something around that, they're all young teenagers, that there is so much fixation on their virginity. Then the fact that they all die by suicide and choose to take their own lives. And it kind of takes away all that agency from the women. I don't know how I feel about this one. I love the book. I think it's fantastic. And all the things I've just mentioned about it being told from the boy's point of view, the male gaze, are all done fantastically. And it's very purposeful. There's just something about the virginity and the suicide that doesn't sit right with me, and the fact that no agency is given to these female characters whatsoever. Tell me your thoughts on that one, because I think that one is highly debated. Next we have Norwegian Wood by Haruki Murakami. This is in a similar vein to the others. I've kind of tried to thread these all together as best as I can. This is another one about mental health and the male gaze. So this follows our main characters Toru and Naoku, but this basically follows our main character Toru, who is obsessed with this girl Naoko, and she eventually ends up, spoilers, in an institute for her mental health, and she suffers depression and is suicidal again. However, so much of this book focuses on Naoko's body and Toru's perspective of her. The fact that she is his best friend's girlfriend in the beginning of the book is really uncomfortable. So it's kind of got that cheating kind of element, again, like Anna and the French Kiss. But her depression is so glamorized, and Toru almost sees himself as a savior for her. I mean, the book is described as sexy and funny, but so much of this book is really dark and really serious. And it's almost like that humor is taking away, again, Naoko's agency. She's never really given her own voice. Toru thinks that he can save her, make her better, and that she's not really depressed. And there is kind of that, again, that attention-seeking representation of mental health, which is so damaging and so just wrong. Again, it's hard to talk about this book without spoilers, but I don't think necessarily with this book those are spoilers. I think that is more just what the book is about in the long term, and it's more about the relationships between these characters than what happens to them characters. Does that make sense? It's really hard to say whether or not this book is written well, because again, it's a Japanese book and it was translated into English, and whether that nuance is captured or not is obviously debated when it comes to translated fiction. Unless you can read the original text, I don't think we can really comment on how beautifully written it is or not. But I think that beautifully written isn't an excuse for the damaging, problematic things that the book presents. However, I do really love this book. I did read this book purely because Norwegian Wood by the Beatles is one of my favourite Beatles songs of all time, and that is what this book is based on. Our main character, he is Norwegian Wood in a airport, I believe, and is reminded of Naoko. That there is another problem, because the song Norwegian Wood is about a prostitute. Let that sink in. We are then reminded by the title of this book through why our main character thinks about this girl via the song is because of her sexuality, because of her female body and the male gaze. Okay, and the final book that I want to talk about, the final problematic book that I did love, is The Help by Kathryn Stockett. Now, I read this book and loved it at the time. I thought it was fantastic. I read it about 4 years ago now. And this is a book about black maids, The Help, in the 1950s. So the 1950s were obviously a very racist time. We had a lot of civil rights movements in the late 50s and throughout the 60s. I struggle talking about things like this because I know it's not really my place, but I want to highlight the issues with it. But I don't want to say anything that might also still be problematic. So I'm going to try and do this as best I can. But this is also the reason that the book is problematic, because the book is written by a white woman, and the black women are depicted through a white lens. So the controversies around this book are really well known. There was even family tensions between Kathryn Stockett and her brother. There was a lawsuit against Kathryn Stockett's depiction of the maids in this story. It all surrounds the fact that these women are never given a voice of their own. And this kind of is a prime example for the argument of reading own voices books. So this was made into a film with Emma Stone and Viola Davis. A lot of people will defend things like this being made into TV shows by saying, well, if it was that problematic, why did these black actors agree to be a part of it. Viola Davis has said she regrets being a part of this film, not because of the creatives involved in it, not because of the actors, not because of anything like that, but because she now feels that it is a very white-centric story, and the characters who are depicted in this story aren't the voices of people who actually lived through this. There are so many people that could tell this story, and it's the fact that it was a white woman who decided to tell the story. It is a white woman whose book blew up and became made into a film when so many other people could write this story. One of the other things about voices in this book is actually the speech and the dialect used. So all of the black characters are written using a black dialect. I believe that is called African American Vernacular English. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but when I was looking into this, this is one of the things that came up. So a lot of the G's are dropped and a lot of the language is drawn out. So the way that the black characters speak in this book is written down in the text. However, it isn't for the white characters, even though this is set in the South and all of these characters will have very distinctive accents. It kind of accentuates the difference between the black and the white characters and others, the black characters, and kind of humiliates them by making them seem less intelligent through the way they're speaking, when it could so easily be the case that these white characters could have their southern dialect written down into the text. Does that make sense? Those are the big issues that people have with these books. It's the fact that the black voices are written by a white woman and they are very much othered by the white writer. So those are 5 books that I love, that I also find really problematic, and have acknowledged the problems, and I'm still working through those problematic issues to work out how I feel. But I do enjoy these books, and I don't think that those problematic things should really make me feel guilty for enjoying a book, because you can find problems anywhere. I think it's how we respond to that problematic content and how that makes us as people, and how that builds our character and understanding of others. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it made sense to you. I hope it just wasn't a ramble. Let me know in the comments down below if you've read any problematic books but loved them anyway. What are your problematic faves? Also, let me know if you've read any of these books and if you had similar thoughts on the problems within these books, and if you want me to do more of these videos in the future. As usual, I will leave all my links in the description box down below. Go and follow me on Twitter and Goodreads and all that good stuff, and I'll see you in another video very, very soon. Bye.